Hello, my name is Pete Tseronis, and I am the CEO and founder of a company called Dots and Bridges, which is pretty much what you may think that to be. It's about connecting dots and building bridges in a storytelling kind of manner. I'm also the former Chief Technology Officer at the United States Department of Energy, where I spent 8 of my 25 years inside the Beltway and out, featuring so much awesomeness that emanates from the Beltway, but is also happening in places like Pittsburgh, West Virginia, and Albany, in the case of the National Energy Technology Lab. I have a passion, I have a fervor, I have an interest, I have a curiosity in how all of the research and development in our country is accelerating the innovation that we need in our lives, to benefit humanity and to add societal and economic value. Our national laboratories are an outgrowth of the immense investment in scientific research in our country. The United States initiated this ecosystem of brilliance during World War II, and the national laboratories continue to serve as leading institutions for scientific innovation in the United States. The United States Department of Energy specifically and its 17 national labs tackle the critical scientific challenges of our time, ranging from climate change to the origins of our universe, and we continue to see and hear and feel the impact that these incredible crown jewels are providing our lives and those lives around the world. Specifically today, my guests are Dr. Brian Anderson, Director of the National Energy Technology Laboratory, and Dr. Jerry Carr, Jr., scientist, program, project manager, brilliant man that he is as well at the National Energy Technology Lab. We're going to talk a bit about this, one of the 17 crown jewels, treasures as I like to refer to them, get to know a bit about the culture through the leadership, and also celebrate the people that I know Brian and Jerry know really allow the NETL to provide the world what it does. Maybe we dabble a bit into fossil energy, material science. We may use some polysyllabic terms, but we promise to explain any acronym. But that's the plan for today, and I'm super excited and honored to be a part of it. So with that, contextually, we will shout out a few times to the Office of Tech Transitions in the United States Department of Energy, which is one of the components of the technology transfer and commercialization efforts. The Office of the Technology Transitions, also known as OTT, is home to the Lab Partnering Service as well, which is what I have to give a shout out to my colleague, Mr. Rob Bechtel. It provides unprecedented access to the world's most advanced scientific facilities and researchers across the department's national lab complex. The Office of the Undersecretary for Science and Energy is where the Office of Fossil Energy lives, and the National Energy Technology Lab is indeed one of the key research arms of that specific office. So, sorry for sucking a little air out of the call there, but I wanted to give a little bit of the context. So, Dr. Brian Anderson, Dr. Jerry Carr, if you can kind of fill in a little bit of maybe what you feel defines your personal and professional passion that has brought you to this incredible place, the NETL, that would be wonderful. And maybe we'll go ahead and start there with Brian Anderson, the director.
Well, hi, Pete. It's really exciting. I'm always excited to talk about technology, about tech transfer, about NETL, about the path that brought me here, whatever it is you want to talk about. I'm a native West Virginian. I grew up in the state of West Virginia, and when I was in high school, I participated in a science bowl. I was a science nerd. I also played sports, 3 sports, but I was a science nerd for sure, and showed up at NETL at the time was Morgantown Energy Technology Center for a Science Bowl, and wondered, what is this place? And I did learn about it when I was there at the Science Bowl. We came in second, by the way, that time, but so close. But then, went on to get a degree in chemical engineering at West Virginia University, did a master's and PhD at MIT, and even when I was at MIT, collaborated with folks at the NETL and rushed back here into West Virginia, was a faculty member at West Virginia University, but had an office and a lab at NETL the entire time as a faculty member. So as a faculty member at the university for 13 years, founded the Energy Institute at the university. And one of the interesting components of this pathway is the founding of the Energy Institute. I decided to stay in West Virginia. I had a job offer to move to Switzerland and have a lab at ETH, the Swiss Federal Technical Institute, a world premier institute, and ended up staying because there was an opportunity to participate in the energy transition, create jobs across the region, Appalachia, partner with NETL from the outside at the time, and it's what brought me back, was the coupling of energy technologies, the path forward of the energy transition into a lower carbon footprint economy, and doing it right within energy communities. So then I joined NETL almost 3 years ago, and then even just this past year, recently was asked by the Biden administration to lead an interagency effort across 11 federal agencies, leveraging NETL to revitalize the economies of energy communities and take technologies and make sure that they're moving into the market and commercializing to make folks' lives better. And so all of that's the whole, that's a story in a nutshell, but, little components in there. My grandfather was a coal miner. My father was in the oil and gas industry. I got my first job as soon as I could at 16 years old, working in an aluminum plant in casting of aluminum powered by coal. And that's part of my history, but then looking to the future, leveraging NETL technologies is incredibly exciting.
Well, Brian, I'm going to pivot here to Dr. Jerry, who also has an incredible path and journey, but I have to give a little shout out to you. I mean, being named the 2020 Laboratory Director by way of the Federal Laboratory Consortium, what an honor that is. I know that your humility is being expressed as we speak, but congratulations. And then this appointment to the Interagency Working Group, folks, audience, there are links, and there will be links to the mission of the coal and power plant communities and economic revitalization efforts that Brian is leading, and that is a tremendous opportunity showcasing the NETL, but also, Brian, your leadership is never or ever more needed, if you will, and what an accomplishment and honor that must be to serve the country in that capacity. So thank you for that. We're going to get into some of this Key Lab initiative coolness, if you will, of the NETL. Let's go to Dr. Jerry Carr, Detroit guy that he is, that I love. I've got some family in Detroit, a physicist. I'm going to steal a little bit, but Georgia Institute of Technology, West Virginia University. I do have to add, I have a lot of fandom for the city of Pittsburgh. My wife's from Pittsburgh, and the backyard brawl. We can't forget about the great city of Albany out west. But Jerry, why don't you give us a little bit of that passion that you feel for working at this incredible institution, a little bit about your journey getting there.
Great. No, I appreciate that, Pete. And by the way, let me just second that Director Anderson has been an incredible leader for our lab, and I just want to make sure that people know that it's not just Pete who's saying that. A lot of us are saying that. But my journey is something kind of crazy. Like you said, I grew up in Detroit. I was good at math and science. Didn't know what to do with it. I was fortunate to have a lot of good teachers surrounding me. So they told me I should be an engineer. I didn't know what that was, but I said, all right, let's go for it. And I asked, where are you supposed to go if you do that? They said MIT. And I said, all right, let's go for it. And they were like, are you serious? I got into MIT. I was fortunate to do that. Ran out of money. That's how I wound up at Georgia Tech also, and got my bachelor's in physics there. And it was weird because this haphazard journey was a question of, what do I want to do? How do I want to do it? And I loved engineering, still love it. It was a question of answering, how do you do things? I really wanted to understand why. And that's when I discovered that physics was a better alignment for my passion. Still got a repressed engineer inside of me, but that journey still led me to Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I was doing a co-op with Georgia Tech and got to get exposure to something called exploration neutron source. An exciting, at the time, $1.4 billion science project for DOE at Oak Ridge National Lab. And I got to see how they pulled the resources of 6 national labs together to actually go ahead and achieve that goal, get something that was basically on time, on budget, and provide some incredible technology for material science. That got me really excited. I wanted to learn more about it. I wanted to learn how I could contribute to it. I became a plasma physicist because I was focused on something they call the ion source, which is like the engine of the exploration neutron source, making negative hydrogen ions. And got that. I actually taught for a little bit down in Texas, a small school called Texas Lutheran University. And I saw an opportunity to come back to DOE at NETL while I was down there, and I just jumped at it because I really, again, just love that collaborative effort that was out there. The big science projects that lead to innovation, just by trying to do something big, that'll always attract me. And it's been fun. I've been able to come back as a physical scientist / project manager and get my hands on finding ways to bring these projects to fruition. So the only other thing I'll add about myself, besides I got 2 little 5-year-olds that run my household a little bit right now, I'm big on the intersection of basically scientific literacy and what I do in my day job. So I do a lot of social justice work. There's the Health Science Technology Academy, and also the NAACP that I work with. And really, I see it all as one and the same. There's a lot of overlap between how you lead those organizations and how you lead, how you get the opportunity to lead within NTL. But the biggest thing for me is just finding a way to mentor young people and make it so they have a journey that's as direct as they can to get to what they want to do, and trying to access communities like West Virginia, access communities like Detroit, finding a way to bring these kind of stories to those folks because, I had to make it up, and I don't want other people to have to do that.
Well, Jerry, I mean, humanizing each of you is what I hope will come out of this as well. I know that having gotten to know a bit about you in our prep calls is truly amazing. I mean, Brian Anderson, I have coal mining roots in my family in northeastern Pennsylvania, up there in Lansford and Coaldale and Summit Hill and Jim Thorpe, and just knowing that, and Jerry, you sharing children, family, and faith and all that stuff is so important to why you love to go to work every day. And I do. I miss working in the government. But I have 4 of them. I live in Montgomery County, Maryland. I have an Australian Labradoodle, and cost of living kind of forced me out. So I had to go figure it out and maybe go back one day. Brian, I'm going to come back to you and thank you again, Jerry and Brian. And please interject a bit of that personal formation. I mean, obviously, you're brilliant minds. People can Google you and see amazing speeches you give, but where you work at the NETL and its history. Brian, the future of the NETL, you mentioned your Biden administration appointment. Can you just, again, high level, maybe present to the audience a bit about this amazing history and laboratory? And we'll eventually get to your key lab initiatives, but I'm thinking if we can, through your mouth or your voice, we can hear a little bit about what makes NETL, the NETL, so special and has been special for about 100 years or so, right?
Yeah. In 1908, there was a spate of mine explosions due to coal mining dust in the underground mines in Appalachia. And so Congress said, we need to fix this. And so they established our facility under the Bureau of Mines in Pittsburgh in 1910. And so our history starts with solving a problem. There was a problem for society, so they founded the NETL's precursor laboratory in Pittsburgh. During the Second World War, we needed new materials for the Navy. We needed new materials for the hulls of submarines, and so they founded our Albany Research Center in Albany, Oregon, to develop new alloys, new metals. And so in 1943, in the midst of the Second World War, is when the Albany Research Center stood up, and its work has spurred on a specialty metals industry in that part of Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. And then after the Second World War, when we saw what the Germans were doing in terms of converting coal into diesel fuel, we said we need to do that too in the U.S. And so they founded our synthesis fuels laboratory in Morgantown. And so that's the history of our 3 laboratories, was trying to come up with either new inventions or solve a real world problem. Fast forwarding through NETL's history, everything from the Clean Air Act, many of us remember when acid rain was a topic that we as children knew. We could see that the marble headstones in graveyards were deteriorating, and so NETL was called to the table, and we developed technologies to reduce sulfur emissions, SOx emissions, and NOx emissions from our power sector. And then we were we were key in developing horizontal drilling and fracking, which did revolutionize over the last decade our energy system in the U.S. That has resulted in some decreases in pollution, in the United States over the last decade and setting the chart forward to the future. And for 25 years, we've been working on carbon capture and sequestration. That's the story. But like you said, bringing the people to the table is really where the story comes to. It makes sense to folks because we at NETL we have a whole cadre, 1,200 employees and staff on research and management like Jerry, who are passionate about solving the world's toughest challenges. And that is why it's exciting for me. Jerry is a great example of bringing that passion for deep science. I mean, here's a PhD plasma physicist that is working on tackling, a component of the world's greatest challenge right now in tackling climate change. And that's what's exciting to me is being able to work with folks like Jerry to solve these real world problems.
Yeah, Brian, I appreciate that. And Jerry, we're going to come over to you because you mentioned a few things. And again, people, humanity, impact. The lab, folks read about it, energy.gov, Google NETL. It's truly amazing. I have top 10 things you need to know about NETL. I might sprinkle one of them in there. Actually, I'll go with the first one here. It's could be called the oldest and newest of the Energy National Labs. And Brian mentioned a bit about it, but it wasn't until 1999 that the Secretary of Energy elevated what was then the Federal Energy Technology Center to national laboratory status. But the roots go back, steal a few of Brian's awesome little tidbits from speeches. It's got a rich history. Jerry, you mentioned your time at Oak Ridge National Lab, and just to maybe geek out a little bit, because I think part of what would be wonderful is to share with the audience that while we have these brilliant minds, scientific folk like yourself, and the people that make up the technology centers, the world-class research, our labs, our facilities, as taxpayers, we are investing in research and development. It's a huge part of our budget each and every year. But the collaborative community working at Oak Ridge, spallation, if I'm even saying that correctly, okay, awesome. And actually, when I visited Oak Ridge, I saw it, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I remember at the time, Tom Mason was like, well, it's like, protons and making things, discoverable faster so that our cell phones and cars and planes, trains, and automobiles and things work more efficiently. I'm like, oh my God, I get it now versus trying to actually study it. But can you go back to some of that and maybe talk a little bit about carbon capture, storage? Why are some of these facilities, both at the NETL and in other labs, and the need for collaboration so important so that we can achieve a more secure, resilient workforce of the future, an infrastructure of the future? Can you just talk about some of the things that you got to do every day and the impact it's having on lives today and in the future?
Sure. I mean, to make it a bigger picture thing, I will say that carbon capture and storage, those are essential tools to climate mitigation. Some people believe they are the best tools. I tend to believe that data as well. And, as we're taking an all-of-the-above approach in terms of how do we tackle these things, you just can't ignore carbon storage, carbon management, and carbon capture. It's all part of it. And I'll say that some of the projects that I'm working with, I believe, spotlighted here. One of them is the SMART initiative. That stands for Science-Informed Machine Learning for Accelerating Real-Time Decision in Subsurface Applications.
Say that 5 times.
I know, right? I stick with SMART, but I want to make sure that I said it at least one time. Get that acronym out there. But let's just boil it down to what I like about it. It's almost close to 20 institutions. Some are national labs again, and some are actually universities and other nonprofits. Working together to try to find a way to bring a machine learning approach to the subsurface. Think about making a Google map down there, of some sort, where you can know where you can store carbon, know where you can find energy, oil resources like that. It's all part of it, and it's just an incredible thing to watch all these brilliant minds get together and work on this and finding ways to help them, help that project out in order to make it happen. Another approach that I know that I'm involved in, I guess that goes towards this is M-Wave technology. That one of my projects utilizes this. And when I say the word M-Wave, what I'm really talking about is microwaves. It's like you're using your microwave oven. We're looking for ways to use that technology to reduce energy barriers, make it so You can make chemical processes happen faster, more efficiently. If you can do those type of things, and like you said, go back to making the products, the technology that come out of this. If you can do those type of things, you lower costs, you lower energy, you lower all kinds of things. And there's so many people who win in that kind of environment. And I just definitely want to spotlight those things. I mean, and I think that's.
Yeah. Well, Jerry, just to pile on a little bit, again, for folks who want to learn more about SMART, science-informed machine learning for accelerating real-time decisions in subsurface applications. I mean, acronyms sometimes are like, thank God for them, and this is one, but if you really read it, you go, oh my gosh, who's working on it? 10-year multi-organizational effort, oil and gas operational, real-time visualization. Got to give a shout out to our colleague, Kelly Rose, who does amazing things with subsurface analytics out in Albany. So Kelly, if you're watching, keep doing what you do so well. And Jerry, we're going to come back to that. You mentioned M-Wave technology. I'm going to come back to Dr. Anderson here to kind of set the landscape a bit or extend this discussion to key lab initiatives. I mean, strategic plans change a bit based on what's happening in the world. We have an infrastructure bill that's being discussed because we saw things like ERCOT. We've seen things like Fukushima. We've seen Superstorm Sandy. I mean, acts of God, non-acts of God requires us to re-examine how can we be more resilient. That's a popular term inside the Beltway. Can you address, maybe at a high level, and go as deep as you want, Dr. Anderson, about your 4 key lab initiatives?
Absolutely. So what we've identified is key areas of capabilities that we have that we want to make key investments in. And so we have key laboratory initiatives and some strategic goals that fit within the context of everything from decarbonization to resiliency, like you mentioned. So the key laboratory initiatives, Jerry actually teed up 2 of them very well. One is in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so another acronym called SAMI, but it is the Science-Based Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning Institute. And so the real key here is, we've been doing machine learning and data analytics for years. As a matter of fact, when I was about 17 years old, I was running data analytics processes at this aluminum plant that I worked at. But we've come a long way. We have a supercomputer in the top 100 in the world here on site in terms of its computational power. We have a center for artificial intelligence and machine learning at our Pittsburgh facility. And so the investments that we're making in that is to enable projects like that SMART, the subsurface artificial intelligence work that Jerry was mentioning, so that we can take AI and machine learning, sprinkle in all the fundamental physical science knowledge and modeling capabilities that we've had for many years, for decades, and bring those closer together. So there's data analytics methods that a lot of times the algorithms are empirical. They take a bunch of data and try to figure out something from it. We know a lot about the physics. So as we bring them together, we're going to have a much richer environment for artificial intelligence and machine learning to create knowledge. And so that's one of the key laboratory initiatives. The other one is a microwave reaction technology that Jerry was mentioning. I like to give folks a little bit of the analogy. If experiment at home, if you have frozen food and you stick it in and you don't do it on defrost, it doesn't heat uniformly, right? Because the microwave is specifically tuned to the resonant frequency of the water molecule. And when the water molecule is in the ice phase, it doesn't actually vibrate and heat up very well. So that's why your defrost cycle goes on and off. But the thing is, we have microwave technology that we've invested in here at the lab that is a unique facility worldwide, where we can adjust the power of the microwave, we can adjust the frequency. So instead of only targeting the frequency of that liquid water, we can target the frequency of some chemical reaction. We can build catalysts that are tuned to that frequency as well, to where we can lower the energy barrier for a reaction. We can create less waste because the reactions are more selective. And it fits within one of our other key laboratory initiatives called the Center for Sustainable Fuels and Chemicals. So we want to be able to take sustainable methods, sustainable sourcing of new fuels that go into the transportation market and the chemical industry to create everything from the circular economy to more sustainable routes to making the goods and manufacturing the goods that we use today, particularly around fuels and chemicals. And so those are three of the key laboratory initiatives, and I mentioned in there making catalysts, and I mentioned the history of Albany in materials. And so the fourth one is the Advanced Alloy Development Facility, is investment in the next generation of being able to build materials, build new alloys and metals, starting with the computer. So we can design and understand how alloys and different metals would perform through modeling, and then build and construct those alloys. We can process them, anneal them, scale them up. And right now in the United States, we don't have the type of research facility in the commercial space or the national lab space to be able to scale up and test alloys at a pre-commercial scale. And so our alloy, the key laboratory initiative there is to build such facilities. So those are the four key laboratory initiatives, and all of those, look like capabilities and competencies that we're investing in at the lab. They all fit within the whole structure of the future of the hydrogen economy, decarbonizing the entire economy by 2050. They fit within resilience, so we can build an energy system that's not only low carbon, low environmental impact, but also resilient and affordable. So all of those are just the investments that we're making so that we're ready to step up to the challenge.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And Brian, I think, again, just listening to this, as much material and no knowledge that I have of your laboratory, it's interesting watching some of your presentations from a year or two ago and what was the initiative of the moment. And now we're living in a world where cybersecurity or resilience and acts of God, as I mentioned, operational technology, the inclusion of sensors and analytics are so a big part of the administration, past and present. It's like a bipartisan thing. That's why I love these conversations. So yes, folks, the 4 key lab initiatives at the moment are incredibly profound and going to do things to, I think, benefit so much more than just a fossil energy sector or ecosystem. So thank you for sharing that. And Brian, I have to shout out that, boy, just hearing you speak, thank God you're part of this working group leading this pioneering effort to get the world to a place where we can live longer and live safer, and our children of the future can appreciate it. So you're a trailblazer, my friend.
Well, Pete, thanks, but I mean, it's the NETL. You mentioned, NETL's people. It's not me. I just get to spend my days talking about the great work of people at NETL. That's kind of my job. I love that part of my job. And you mentioned, Kelly Rose is she's been named as the acting director of that Science-Based Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning Institute as well. And so we have tremendous talented people that we're making facility investments, but it's all because of the people we have at NETL.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. But people want to be led, and you're one heck of a leader, and I'm sticking to my story there, because I think Jerry and I talked on our prep call about what it's like to work for people they love working with. But your humility is contagious. Jerry, I'm going to ask you to put on your visionary sort of, hey, I do all this stuff. We're working with the greatest instrumentation. I get to work in national laboratories, which, folks, are not just energy labs. They actually are utilized worldwide, so there's a coolness factor to that. Jerry, what excites you about some of the research you're doing at the NETL? But can you just give an art of the possible about this future place one day that you hope our world will be taking advantage of, especially with regard to the work being done at the NETL?
I think one of the things I'll point out is just some of the Biden administration goals. So 2035, we hope the power sector can minimize carbon emissions by then. We'll be net zero by 2050. I mean, these are some ambitious goals. And the good thing is, the special thing about NETL is that the fact that we don't just stop at fundamental science. We have to find a way to get technology out of it. That's why it's in our name. And that to me is the key component. We're finding ways to get these things that we're talking about out in the field. We're finding ways to test it out and see what it looks like, come back, fix it, make it better and improve. And eventually, we hope to cross that valley of death that you hear about sometimes in research, where it takes, like, how do you get from a product that's a great idea out to something that's finally commercialized for other people to use. So I think a lot about those type of things, and I like the projects that I work with because I can see clear pathways on how they become out in the field. And not everything works, but that's science, right? You go ahead and you evaluate, but you got to have a pathway, and I think that that's part of what you're asking. It's just the thing that makes NETL special, the fact that we know how to do that. We do it all the time. We have patents in the industry. People come to us to solve all kinds of problems because they know that we can eventually help, not just, the effort of science, but also just help the economy, help our industry partners, as well as, have beneficial impact on the environment. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and Jerry, if I can stay with you for a minute, because you really just touched on what I think is one of the outputs from, right, research, development, patents. The labs are not just propeller heads and dudes and dudettes sitting there inventing stuff going, I wonder what this is for. I used to love going to Brian's point about the people, meeting the people who go to work every day and would say, if this makes $1 billion, I remember this when I was out at Slack in San Francisco, great. I like that I helped invent it. And I would then say, well, what is that going to do for me? And the story of commercializing the technology. You mentioned helping to get it out into the industry is a big part of the tech transfer commercialization agenda, which we mentioned earlier, the Office of Tech Transitions is driving. Can you just speak to maybe a story, or if you will, not to put you on the spot, but I think of people you collaborate with beyond the scientific community. I mean, large business, venture capitalists, universities, nonprofit entrepreneurs. Can you talk about what some of this collaboration is like when we can invent, but we also need to be a part of how it's going to enable or impact society, humanity. Is that something that gets you going every day?
It does. When I think about, how we use, like, say, universities, we bring them in early. We work with them every step of the way, for example, to make sure that as they do the things in the lab, and they train the next generation of scientists and engineers. They're meeting the goals that we know that we're being put upon, that are being put upon us from all our stakeholders, EPA, industry leaders. We're part of that facilitation of that conversation, and it just I can't emphasize enough that makes a better project, that makes a better program. And the students that come out of there and become laboratory leaders, that become, that they have an understanding of science and how it has to be connected with something that humanity needs. Obviously there is a part of science that we have to just explore because we need to explore, but ultimately we want to help humanity. And I think that when we have that connection, that when we act as that bridge as this national laboratory, we get people who are not afraid to talk to the public, bring the public in, make sure that they feel comfortable with what we're doing. Those type of things, I think, come from the leadership that NETL provides. And, as a plasma physicist, I'm actually well aware of when that didn't happen, like I think about things like fusion, for example, or actually fission, if I'm going back in time when we talk about nuclear energy. That was a teachable moment for the scientific community. We thought we had something. We thought that we could make a new energy system that everybody should just get excited about, but we weren't letting people in, and so movements sprung up about people saying, I don't want this in my backyard. I don't know what it is. All of these great, brilliant minds that I've worked with have trained me. I try to use that, and one of the things what they've done with me is they've shown me that you have to be willing to talk to the public. You have to explain to people, like, why is this important to them? Otherwise, that connection just doesn't occur, and we're not actually giving humanity what they need. So I think that's the way I would.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to come to Brian with a similar question just about, again, there's so much that goes on. There's never enough time in the day, but there's also that we need people to roll up their sleeves, and it's not just the scientists, it's not just the NETL, it's a community effort. I always talk about cylinders of excellence that exist in every business and every ecosystem. People call them stovepipes. I heard cylinders of excellence at charm school where I went one day, and it was like, oh my gosh, I like saying that versus silos. It's got such a negative connotation. But horizontal. Being a bridge, you mentioned it. You're a dot connector. At the end of the day, Brian, you and Jerry, and I'll even throw myself in, we need that. That needs to be a component of what's in it for you, as I like to say to the resident and citizen, Joe, Joanne Sixpack, and why you should care. And I love that you just expressed that because I think that's critical. Okay, Brian, I'm going to come back to you because I want to ask you the question similarly, but I also want to table it with, we've talked about chemical, we've talked about energy, we've dabbled a little bit into water, we've talked about nuclear reactors. Folks listening, the 16 critical infrastructure sectors in our country, 16, there are only 16, but they're kind of the things that matter. Technology is not the problem. Technology, be it digital, digitization of the work being done at NETL, the goal is to make those sectors or enable them to be more resilient, more reliable, more sustainable, more flexible. And then the impact on our cities and communities and municipalities is also another manner in which I like to talk about the impact on humanity. Brian, when you think about what Jerry was just speaking to and what's happening in the world today with infrastructure being front and center and people still like, well, what does that mean? It's the planes, trains, roads, and automobiles, material science, knowing about what's underneath the earth to make the place a better, safer world. Can you talk a little bit about that art of the possible and putting on that vision hat? What excites you about the future? Not just what you're leading, but what you're in collaboration with other national labs and other federal agencies that gives you a hope of promise for the next generation.
There are a lot to choose from. I want to pick a couple highlights. I mean, I'm going to make a connection earlier to the microwave technology we have developed, and I'm going to go all the way to the end now of why people should care. We just patented a new technology using microwaves to create ammonia from natural gas and be able to pull the carbon out of it. Ammonia can be an energy carrier for hydrogen as a liquid. But again, why should people care? We make ammonia. We use ammonia in fertilizer. It is a basis of basically our entire fertilizer system. And the process we have developed is much more environmentally friendly, lower pressure, lower temperatures than the traditional method that we've been using for nearly 100 years called Haber-Bosch. And so we have almost a direct replacement that decreases the environmental impact of the precursor to a lot of our fertilizer system across the country that we use to make our food. And so our food actually will become greener. You're talking about infrastructure. One of our just amazing technology. And to back it up, it's a partnership. The ammonia process, it's with West Virginia University, University of Pittsburgh, and Royal Dutch Shell. And it's really about getting it out there and commercializing it. And I think Shell can attest to its potential. Another really good one is taking coal-derived materials or taking coal and coal waste. And we have developed a group called Chris Matrenga and his team in the Pittsburgh lab have developed a very low-cost way of turning coal into all kinds of different materials, like graphene is one example. Graphene has tremendous properties, but it's really expensive to make. We've got a 1-liter bottle that costs about as much as my car of aqueous graphene and water. We can make it for less than a penny's worth of coal and about an afternoon worth of a technician. I mean, that's how much orders of magnitude cost decrease. Now, again, why does that matter to the typical consumer? Well, if we blend that graphene in with concrete, it lasts longer. It's stronger. It's more weather resistant, more corrosion resistant. So when we think of building out our infrastructure, building bridges, building roads that folks use, we have the potential of making them last longer, and the pothole I hit this morning on the way into work, maybe it won't be there next time. That's another reason, but also making the whole system more reliable. there's another route that of a material they can make from coal into something called, it's part of a computer memory chip called a memsistor, but it's from carbon-derived materials, replacing the silicon processes we use today. It's much more environmentally friendly, has the potential to be much more environmentally friendly, derived from carbon-based materials. It's in collaboration with the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, has a tremendous potential to be in every computer chip that's in every device that we have in, our cars and our cell phones, that's made from a carbon material that's a much more environmentally friendly process that has the potential for everybody to use in the future. Those are some really interesting examples. Another one is our team in Pittsburgh has been working on sorbent materials that can pull nasty stuff out of water. I mean, just be blunt. Whether it's acid mine drainage sludge or in Flint, Michigan, lead. We have pioneered in commercializing these sorbent materials that can do wondrous things in cleaning up nasty stuff out of water. And just have to give a shout out to some of these examples. You would think that, NATL, yeah, we worked on horizontal drilling and fracking. We worked on the basis of today's natural gas combined cycle turbine that has the highest efficiency. We partnered with the technology developers, GE and others, on getting those turbines where they are today, to where they're efficient and they're clean and they're reliable. And you would think that's right within our bailiwick and carbon capture and storage, but the examples are almost endless of real world solutions that we're trying to make those connections.
Well, we're getting close to the end, but I just have an idea. But I'm listening now as I'm trying to be like, gosh, you're the moderator here, the facilitator. But I'm like, I have questions. I could just sit and listen to the two of you about, did you know? Look what we are helping, develop. And you just turned a lot of geek speak into clarity for me. So, man, you guys are storytellers, and I love it. And I always say this, thank God we have folks like Jerry and Brian, being able to say, I might be the leader of, but, man, I'd like to get in there and tinker. So I'm excited. And, folks, look, the history of the NETL, go to the website about the R&D 100 awards, the patents it has. Again, just so many stories. And Brian and Jerry are just giving us snippets. All right, we're coming to the end. And, I talked a little bit about the parting shot. But before we get there, I have two really hardball questions, one for each of you. We're going to start with Jerry. And it's one I like to ask. It's my humanizing you a bit more. So I'm sucking a little more air out of the calls for you to be prepared for it. If you weren't this amazing physicist with this incredible knowledge to learn and be curious and do what you do for a living, what profession would you be involved in? What would you be doing if you weren't this incredible researcher in our nation?
That's a great question. As somebody who's actually looked to figure out what they want to do for the longest time and finally landing on it, it's actually hard for me to think of other paths. But I will say this. I just want to help people. I'm very big in education. I'm still trying to do that now. Scientific literacy is huge to me. When I was actually in Boston, I got to work with several nonprofits, AmeriCorps. The Algebra Project actually is the one that comes to my mind right now. There's a gentleman by the name of Bob Moses, incredible civil rights leader, actually has a math background, math position. He believed in algebra being a civil rights issue, not being, people had to have that training by the time they reached ninth grade, otherwise their life outcomes completely diverge. It was just, he had the data to prove it, and he was all about trying to find ways to bring algebra principles to little kids, in elementary school, make them play and have fun, and it just be a game. In my mind, getting close to that, but doing that with science, like having these lab tours that occur, and I know I just brought it back to what I do now, but, finding ways to still bring people closer to, science and math, to me, is always going to be a passion of mine. So even if I'm not in this national lab, I just want to find a way to do that. And quite frankly, I feel that some of the things that we've seen over the past year and a half demonstrates science's importance. And I think that more people who are out there who are, I know you've heard folks as Joe Sixpack, just people throughout the country. If we have a greater appreciation for just how that field works, how those fields work, and how we can get our children excited about it, that's why I want to be involved in, And I'm trying to do that on the side. I'm trying to do that with the organization, but I can't see myself not trying to do it at all. So I think that's my best answer.
I love it. It's the teacher, it's the educator, it's the pay it forward DNA you have and maintain. And I need to get my 14-year-old getting to know you because I think he has a thing for STEM, and I'm like, I want to channel that. I'm like, talk to Dr. Jerry. He'll tell you about it because I'm not good at that. Brian, same question to you. What would you be doing if you weren't the lab director at the NETL?
Well, Jerry made me look bad. Mine would be maybe a little more self-indulgent than as the altruism that Jerry shows. I would probably be a singer. I used to do a lot of singing. I'm classically trained. I trained as an opera singer. I've done some opera in Boston, as a matter of fact, and in West Virginia. I used to sing with the Boston Symphony. It was the greatest thing. And when I was in grad school, I'd ride my bicycle from MIT. I'd be in the lab all day, working, and jump on my bike right across the river, and then go get to sing with the Boston Symphony. It was pretty incredible. So I'd probably either do that or I always wanted to open up a restaurant. If I'm not in the lab, I'm usually standing in my grill, and so those would be one of the two things. Although my calling my entire life was to be a teacher. I mentioned my father's in the oil and gas sector, but my mother, my grandmother, my dad, even for a while, my sister, everybody are teachers in my family, and so I was going to be a teacher, and so for me that was combining the engineering, science, math, teacher. Hey, what do you know? I was a professor, but I probably would be teaching science at a high school or something because just like Jerry, I would never be a professional. I don't think I could be a professional singer, but so I'd probably be teaching somehow.
Well, Brian, I have to say it. You teed it up, folks. You can find references to this guy doing apparently one heck of an Ave Maria. So I'm going to try to find that somewhere on the net because I think that would be way cool. And that's a great story. So thank you, Brian, for sharing that thought, as well as Dr. Jerry. Okay, we're closing it out, fellas. I mean, I'm going to say it in my parting shot how just honored and blessed I am to have gotten to share a bit of your story in some way, and I get to go tell all my friends and family here in the Beltway how amazing you are in my own words. Jerry, the parting shot, what do you want to leave with somebody watching this so that it could maybe inspire them to go to NETL's website or research spallation or look at carbon capture? What is your parting shot to the group? And Brian will come right to you.
Parting shot is first understand that we are human beings. I love the fact, Pete, that you had such humanizing conversations. Matter of fact, Brian, I can't help but mention that I have some envy. My father is a musician and singer, and actually, if you want to Google me, you might find him and his album from back in '81, actually. But still, back to what you were asking, Pete, there's this need to understand that we care about what's going on as well as everyone else. And honestly, the stuff that we do, I still feel that it's very accessible. You just have to be trained. And I think that the younger you start that training, the more it is you can get deeper into the field. I mean, people look at folks who drive and don't even think that that's complex. But the reality is your brain is doing a ton of operations while you're operating a motor vehicle. Physics, in my mind, is the same way. I'm doing it, but that's because I was trained. And, the reality is children, young people, the more we can train them to do whatever it is that's their passion, I think that's where we're going with all this. But with that training, this is what I want to spotlight is this. We have a moral imperative for our minds to understand what society needs, the social justice aspect implications that are out there for that. I need people not only to just become leaders in these fields, but also turn around and in our communities, in our society, and make sure that they understand that we can be resources for that conversation as well. We really can. And we can't just, none of us can afford to just go into a dark corner and not talk to the public. I think that's the one thing I want to caution against. Please use this training and train yourself in other things. So that way, when you do get asked about, like, how is this going to impact rural West Virginia, or how is this going to impact the inner city of Detroit, you have answers because you've looked into that aspect too, not just, how do you make microwaves, break down energetic barriers. So I think that's my parting shot.
Thank you. And I think that's the beauty of, we all have curiosity, and tapping into it can open up so much, and that's needed. So what a way to close that out. Dr. Anderson, close us out with your parting shot.
Well, so my parting shot is, we can do this. We can save the planet. We can continue to keep people employed, and we can have a resilient and reliable energy sector. NETL, we're at the heart of it. We're tackling this problem head on, and come join us. So I'm always trying to bring people into our team, and if you've got an interest in it, we want you part of the team, whether it's collaborating, whether it's talking with us, or joining us directly here. We're right in the midst of tackling some of the world's greatest challenges, and doing it right, doing it in a just manner, just as Jerry had mentioned, environmental justice, energy justice, and doing right by the energy communities that have brought the world where we are today. And so that my parting shot is, we're right in the midst of it, and we're doing it.
Well, this is not to say too easy, but Jerry and Brian, your authenticity, your credibility, and I think that desire for not thinking you're the smartest guys literally in the room is an incredible quality. And I think folks who are watching this will emulate that, should emulate that. So thank you. And you both really, audience, open government tenets are participatory, collaborative, and transparency. Those are what we as a country, as a national lab, as a world need more than ever now. And I just want to thank Brian, you, the wonderful National Energy Technology Lab, Jerry, you and your stories and just your passion for helping connect a few dots, build a few bridges, and I look forward to the next time.